Leo wasn't sure how long he had fainted, but he slowly woke up from a deep nightmare. He cried and yelled the names of his mom and dad, and he flipped over and got up. As a streak of golden light shone over him, he squinted his eyes subconsciously, and an imposing figure appeared in front of him and blocked the eye-piercing light. This man reached out his hand, wanting to give Leo some help. At the same time, he asked intimately, "You are awake?" However, the boy suddenly thought of something, and he moved away as if he were electrocuted. As he rolled to the side, he warned loudly, Don't touch me. The mutated demon beast injured me, so I might have that evil energy on me. If you are close to me, you might be corroded by it. I don't want to harm you." Ha 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 ha. A series of laughter sounded, and that friendly voice said, "Good kid. You are a good kid. You thought for others instantly. You're an honorable Alanian. You have won my friendship. Who are you?" "My injuries." While he spoke, Leo found that all the intense pain that he was sensing was gone. Also, the flesh on his shoulder that was torn off by the level 3 demonic wolf also grew out miraculously. It felt like he was never injured in the first place. "All right, you don't need to look anymore. Little guy, your injuries are all healed." That friendly voice sounded again. Leo looked up and realized that this young man who was standing by the window was the one who was surrounded and protected by those warriors in white earlier. "You are." Leo suddenly thought back to the scene before he fainted and remembered that warm golden energy flame. He instantly understood what had happened, and he asked, "You cured me? You can heal the evil energy? How is this possible? Even the priests of the Holy Church can't do this. Who are you?" This handsome and majestic young man waved at him and said with a smile, "Come here and take a look. You will know." Leo walked to the window in confusion. When he looked out, he was shocked. He saw white clouds and rainbows right beside the windows as if he were at a paradise. As the sunlight radiated from above, he saw the vultures flying below. Am I in the sky?" Leo thought to himself in astonishment. "Are we in the sky?" Leo felt like his brain wasn't strong enough to handle the information. Living in the sky, is this handsome and friendly young man who is like a big brother in fact a god? Those warriors in white are godly warriors under his command. While Leo thought to himself dully, he suddenly realized something and shrilled, "No, I can't stay here. My sisters, Healy and Dilly, are waiting for me. Oh God, I can't stay here any longer. Majestic God, thank you for saving me. But can you put me back into the mortal world? I must find my sisters. They are in a dangerous situation. God? Mortal world." A strange smile appeared on this white-robed young man's face. "An interesting little guy. All right, I will take you down." As soon as he said that, Leo sensed that a gush of golden flame engulfed him, and his body became light. In the next second, he felt a shake with his feet, and he had already stepped on the ground. Leo opened his eyes wide and looked around, seeing the familiar environment. This was where he encountered danger, and that mutated demonic wolf's corpse was still nailed on the big rock. Right now, the sun had already set below the horizon, and darkness started to envelop the land. Leo was worried about his two little sisters. Without hesitation, he turned around and thanked this friendly god, before saying farewell. However, this handsome young man smiled and said, "You don't need to thank me so soon. I will go and find your sisters with you." Leo was elated. He was fortunate enough to have this god with him. Now, he didn't need to worry about monsters and zombies that might be on his way back, and he could return to the stone cave as quickly as possible. Without having to worry about being discovered by monsters, the boy ran toward the stone beach anxiously. As he expected, he ran into many zombies and mutated demon beasts. However, these beings that were terrifying in Leo's eyes were as weak as ants to the young god behind him. With a casual wave of his hand, those terrifying monsters were turned to dust and disappeared into the air like smoke. They couldn't fight back at all. Soon, the two arrived at the stone beach. Leo joyously got to the stone cave where his two little sisters were hiding. Just as he were about to yell his sisters' names, He froze as if he were struck by lightning. The few rocks that were blocking the entrance were moved to the side, and it was empty inside. His two little sisters couldn't be seen. Oh God! What is going on? What happened? No! Leo felt like his head was going to explode. Where did my little sisters go? What happened to them? The boy's mind turned blank, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Also, he didn't dare to think further. The worst-case scenario made him instantly lose the ability to think, and his legs turned to jelly. He almost collapsed onto the ground. The friendly young man walked up and held onto Leo's shoulder so that he wouldn't fall. After inspecting the cave and the area around the entrance, he already figured out what happened. He comforted Leo by saying, "Don't worry. There is no blood around the cave, and there aren't any marks that show struggles and torn pieces of clothes. It means that they didn't encounter zombies or mutated demon beasts. Perhaps they walked out themselves, or some people saved them." These words were no different than heavenly music to Leo's ears. Right. You are right. Leo looked around as well and gradually calmed down. However, he was still feeling a little anxious. After thinking that his two little sisters who were only about 4 to 5 years old might be in danger, he couldn't stand still, and he looked at the young god in front of him with pleading eyes. "Don't worry. Tell me what your little sisters look like and what they are wearing," the young god asked. He seemed confident. Leo quickly told this man what his little sisters were wearing and what they looked like. The young god closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, as if he found something, he smiled and said, "Don't worry. Your two little sisters are not injured and are doing good. However, they encountered a little trouble. Let's go. I will take you to them." After saying that, he grabbed Leo's arm, and Leo felt like he was flying as everything flashed by him. About 10 kilometers away, on a steep stone hill, a team of about 12 Alanian survivors encountered big trouble. Hundreds of zombies surrounded the hill that they were standing on, and they could barely fight off the zombies with the terrain advantage. The men formed a circle and tried to push off the zombies that were climbing the hill, and the women and kids were in the middle. Two little blonde girls were wearing big dresses, and they were Leo's sisters, Keely and Dilly. The situation was very dangerous. Finally, the sharp claws of the zombies left a wound on a male Alanian, and he screamed in desperation. This meant the Grim Reaper targeted him. Perhaps in less than 20 minutes, this injured person would turn into a mindless zombie and attack his peers and friends. The luck of these survivors seemed to be used up. They were facing death. More and more zombies sensed the fight on the hill, and they moved over and joined the siege. Even the red eyes of some mutated demon beasts could be seen in the dark. If this continued, these survivors would be killed by the monsters in less than 10 minutes. "We have to think of a way. If this continues, we are all going to die," a burly, middle-aged man shouted as he swung a double-handed sword. He was wearing leather armor and looked like a mercenary, and some vague warrior energy could be seen on him. He was close to becoming a one-star warrior. As the sword danced in his hands, two zombies that were about to climb up the hill were chopped into pieces. "We need to break open a path and get out as soon as we can. Otherwise, more and more monsters will surround this place in a few minutes. By then, we will all die," a woman shouted. She had a very sexy figure. This woman was wearing tight-fitting clothes and held two sharp daggers in her hands. The daggers moved around swiftly, and it was clear that she was going with the agile and nimble combat style. Every time she moved, one of her daggers would penetrate the head of a zombie. Although she wasn't as explosive and robust as that man who was using the double-handed sword, she had immense combat experience, and she killed more zombies at an even faster speed. At this moment, two young men had been injured, and they were moved to the center of the stone hill. They looked desperate since they weren't far from death. One of them shouted at their peers and asked them to kill him right now. No one wanted to become a monster and get their souls controlled by the evil energy, unable to rest in peace after death. The other person was shaking in fear with his head lowered, and no one knew what he was thinking about. "Damn it! This is all because of these two damn little girls. Anna, I already told you that we shouldn't take these two kids with us. They are only burdens. Now we are getting dragged down. If these two kids listened to us and didn't cry and yell that they want to find their damn big brother, the herds of zombies in the area wouldn't be triggered. During the battle, a young man complained while standing behind others with a poorly made magic wand in his hand. After a long while, he barely shot out a wind blade. "It is already this urgent. Why are you still complaining?" The muscular man who was swinging his sword scolded the mage. In fact, this white-faced mage was the burden amongst the team. In the beginning, this team of survivors thought that with this mage joining them, he would bring them more safety. However, the truth was completely the opposite. This mage wasn't that good at magic spells, and he was not so virtuous as well. When the team was battling monsters, he never used his full strength. However, when it was the turn to divide food, he always took more. In addition, he was mean and liked to point out others' shortcomings, and he felt superior as a mage even though his combat strength wasn't even higher than a stronger ordinary young man. "Okay, Mono, if you think they are burdens, you can leave on your own." The sexy woman named Anna was the temporary leader of this team, and it was clear that she wasn't happy with this mage named Mono who always saved his strength. As she pierced the head of a zombie with one of her daggers, she looked back and shouted coldly while her brown ponytail swung in the air. "I already said that I would save every survivor I see. They have the Alanian bloodline in them. These two little girls are no different. You make it sound easy, but how can I leave now?" Young Mage Mono was a little afraid of Anna. Rather than refuting, he quietly murmured to himself. He wasn't going to use all his strength and exhaust himself. Instead, he went back to casting magic spells casually and saved his energy. When no one paid attention to him, he opened the only magic item on him, a float spell scroll. Streaks of green flames appeared around the scroll, and they soon engulfed this young man. This man's feet already left the ground as he floated into the air. Quick and shot wind blades. "Huh? Mono, what the fuck are you doing?" That muscular mercenary who was fending off the zombies didn't get any help from wind blades for a while, so he turned around and saw this scene. After a quick pause, he started cussing. "You are going to escape now? Coward. You also took away our food." After this cowardice mage used his magic scroll, he secretly grabbed all the food and clean water of the team. In just a few seconds, Mono was already more than 10 meters above the ground. "Ha ha ha, you poor bugs won't live on anymore. It is better to leave them all to me." The young mage's expression looked wicked, and he already decided to break off from the team. Therefore, he shouted back at that mercenary loudly. "Coward! Bastard! Weak bee!" TCH. This scene made everyone in the team shout in anger. The betrayal of their peer and being surrounded by many monsters made the feeling of desperation spread in people's minds. For a moment, they made a series of mistakes and coordinated poorly. As a result, 2 more people were injured by zombies. Even the sexy Captain Anna was injured. A zombie left a long scratch on her thigh. With this opening, the herd of zombies swarmed up and rushed onto the hill. A bit further away, a few mutated demon beasts dashed through the large herd of zombies. Unwilling to wait any longer, they struck like lightning bolts. Compared to mindless zombies, these mutated demon beasts had low-level intelligence, and they kept their animal instinct. They knew that if they didn't make a move right now, the meat in front of them was going to be divided by the zombies. "Done! We are done!" That muscular, middle-aged mercenary cried in desperation. With the team's current combat force, this situation was done. In the center of the team, the 2 blonde little girls were terrified, and they cried and shouted, "Brother Leo!" In the sky, Mage Mono already floated more than 20 meters off the ground, and he was absolutely safe and no longer afraid of the zombies and mutated demon beast. Seeing the struggling people on the ground, he got a little excited and sensed an unnamed pleasure. Suddenly, the zombies in the back of the herd reacted to something, and it was strange and unexpected. Mage Mono looked up, and his expression froze. Since he was more than 20 meters in the air, he had a better view of the area. About 1,000 meters away, a dashing and ethereal white figure appeared, and he moved forward in the herd of zombies casually as if he were walking in a park. A pentagram-shaped light flashed below this figure in a seemingly slow yet fast rhythm. Every time that light flashed, A large group of zombies and mutated demon beasts fell to the ground like the crops under the sickles of farmers. This white figure seemed to be moving forward slowly, but he covered more than 500 meters in a few blinks of the eye. The sea-like zombies and mutated demon beasts couldn't stop him one bit. He looked like a god who was walking in the mortal world. Mage Mono was shocked, and his lips felt dry. This was the first time that he saw someone walking in a big herd of undead creatures this easily. Could it be that this mysterious young man in white reached the legendary moon class? When this man got closer, Mono saw that behind this dashing white figure, there was a boy who was about 14 to 15 years old. This boy's clothes were ragged, and he was wearing a pair of deerskin leather boots that was too large for him, making him look a little ridiculous. The pentagram-shaped light that was flashing under the feet of the man in white didn't injure this boy, and this boy was brought along by a powerful force and moved at the same speed as the man in white. In a flash, this strange pair already got to the foot of the stone hill. Now, the team of Alanian survivors who felt desperate on the top of the hill also realized what was going on, and they gaped as they looked at this white-robed, godlike figure. This young man in white was about 20 years old, and he looked handsome and gentle. Even though he had the majestic presence of a top-level decision-maker, his faint smile made him look friendly. The two opposing temperaments perfectly merged on this young man. In just a few seconds, the noisy and messy wilderness instantly quieted down. The 500 or so zombies and dozens of mutated demon beasts were supposed to be terrifying killers in others' eyes, but they were easily crushed at this moment. The zombies and mutated demon beasts were scorched, and streaks of black smoke came off them. Without exception, they fell onto the ground. The white-robed young man who caused this didn't even move his hands. Moonlight, chilly breeze, dry grass, all of these seemed unreal in the eyes of people like Anna. We are saved. Easily like this, they thought to themselves. Happiness came so fast that they couldn't even savor its taste. Ah, Keely Dilly, you are here. At this moment, the anxious boy rushed out from behind the white-robed young man, and he shouted in surprise. Leo's heart finally dropped back down into his chest when he saw the two little blonde girls who looked scared and helpless on the hill, and he rushed out while thanking the young man in white and his mom and dad who were now probably with the stars for blessing him. Now knowing that his little sisters were still alive, the boy felt like his world became colorful and lively again. On the other hand, the Alanian survivors such as Anna all stared at the handsome young man in white who was now at the foot of the hill. They felt like they were dreaming, and they thought, "This young man looks handsome like the legendary elves, but his strength is as powerful as dragons. Who is he? Where is he from?" Even Anna, who was sexy and proud, felt inferior when facing this young man in white. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly dashed out on the side behind the young man in white, and it looked like a flash of black lightning in the darkness. However, the young man in white didn't seem to detect the imminent danger. "Be careful." Anna and others were shocked, and they couldn't help but warn this young man. This was a mutated level 3 demonic viper, and it was cunning. It was hiding in the rocks a bit further away, and it suddenly sneak attacked, catching these people off guard. With its mouth wide open, it tried to devour this young man in white, while black poisonous liquid dripped down its jaw. When this viper was close to being within 10 meters of this young man, the latter didn't do anything, but the white pentagram-shaped light flashed below his feet. Slap! Even though no overbearing aura appeared, the black viper was struck by an invisible lightning bolt, and it froze in the air for a few seconds before turning into a piece of heated black coal. Crack! Then it fell to the ground and smashed into pieces. Hiss! The Alanian survivors all gasped. With their mouths wide open, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. A level 3 demon beast was equivalent to a 3-star warrior or a 3-star mage. After the mutation caused by the evil energy, this viper's strength increased and was probably close to a mid-tier level 4 demon beast. If it appeared earlier, the team of Alanian survivors would have all died. But now it was easily killed by this young man in white like a weak chicken. How powerful is he? The survivors thought to themselves. This little incident stunned all the Alanian survivors here. For a moment, no one dared to speak since they were afraid of displeasing this master. On the other hand, after comforting his two little sisters, Leo walked to the young man in white while holding his little sister's hands. Just as he was about to bow, the young man in white slightly raised his hand, and a streak of energy rushed out and stopped him. You, sir, master, you are. Finally, the sexy captain of this team of survivors opened her mouth and asked. Perhaps she was really nervous in front of such a master. Anna changed how she addressed this young man several times, and she finally got a sentence out while stuttering. This was far from her usual image of a cold and concise female warrior. The young man in white smiled and didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step forward. While everyone felt like their vision blurred, this young man already appeared on top of the stone hill and stood by the injured people. He said softly, "Let me heal you guys first." After saying that, he lightly wiped his hands over the wounds on the injured people, and a cloud of holy, golden energy flames flashed. When his hands left the wounds, the injured people who were waiting for their death shivered in excitement. They discovered that the wounds on their bodies had healed, and the purplish-black death energy, which was spreading in their blood vessels, had disappeared entirely. You can heal this type of injury? How is this possible? Even the priests of the Holy Church can't heal. You! Could it be that you are a god from heaven? All the Elanians were stunned. This was the first time that they saw someone heal the injuries caused by the undead creatures. He is a god from heaven. I saw it with my own eyes. I was brought to the sky earlier, Leo said proudly. Since he was afraid that others wouldn't believe him, he told them about his encounter, swearing that he had been to heaven. Now, the Alanian survivors looked at the young man in white differently. Those men who were injured by zombies and healed by this young man in white had walked on the verge of death, and they instantly kneeled to thank the god. The sexy Anna and that burly mercenary who used the double-handed sword were doubtful at first, but now they looked at this young man in white with respect. Anna was going to single kneel and express her gratitude, but the injury at her inner thigh got pulled, and she gasped in pain and frowned. Since she was distracted earlier when that mage tried to escape, Anna was injured, and the location of the injury was embarrassing. Her tight-fitting leather leggings got torn, revealing her black underwear and white, smooth skin at the top of her inner thing. Her gasp pulled over others' attention, and almost all the men swallowed their saliva, subconsciously seeing this alluring scene. The young man in white saw this, and he flicked his finger. A streak of golden flames dashed into Anna's injury, turning into waves of heat energy. Those 3 deep scratches on her thigh healed at visible speed, and the smooth and pinkish-white skin grew in a few seconds. As if she were reborn, no one could tell that she was injured earlier. However, the image of her thigh now looked even more alluring. The young man in white waved his hand, and a white warrior robe appeared. Then he handed it to Anna. "Thank you." The female warrior took the robe and put it on. The white robe was loose, but it still couldn't hide her sexy figure. Instead, it gave her a sense of mystery and added to her alluring beauty. After this series of actions, the Alanian survivors gradually calmed down and realized that this young man in white wasn't a haughty god, but probably a powerful, unparalleled master. "Honorable master, thank you for saving us. Please tell us your name. We Elanians will forever remember your gratitude." They all kneeled and proclaimed loudly, "Please get up. I'm King Alexander." The young man in white didn't hesitate and said casually, "Alexander? Alexander. Ah, are you King Alexander, the imperial martial saint of Zenit, the king of Chambord, and the #1 young master of the northern region?" Anna and her peers almost screamed. They knew that this handsome young man probably had a great background, but they weren't anticipating this. King Alexander of Chambord was the most famous person in the northern region of Azeroth now. Almost everyone in the region had heard of his name. As a result, the Alanian survivors were surprised that he appeared in front of them, and they got the chance to see him at such a close distance. That is right. This showy young man in white who acted like a god was the king. After purifying the forest at the border between the Dietford Empire and the former Alania Empire, the expeditionary troop of Chambord crossed the forest on Black Pearl and Cyclops and arrived at the land that formerly belonged to Elanians. Then, They discovered that the degree of contamination was beyond their expectations. Except for a few big cities, almost all the cities and towns had fallen, becoming paradises for evil creatures. Only a few survivors were struggling to stay alive. Obviously, the dark and evil creatures were repelled by the holy power, and they hated this energy instinctively. When Faye used paladin skill, cleansing, to purify the forest on the border, the vast holy power made some of the mutated demon beasts sense an immense threat, and they left the forest before Faye could purify them. These monsters entered the territory that belonged to Elanians before the invasion of the Angie Empire, making the situation even worse. Faye met Leo earlier by coincidence, and he understood what was happening in this land. Seeing the zombies and the mutated demon beasts wandering the land, Faye couldn't help but think back to the famous sci-fi movie, Resident Evil, that he watched on Earth. It was clear that what was happening in front of him was almost identical to the world in Resident Evil. The zombies that were created by the hell energy were almost remakes of the zombies in the movie, but the mutated demon beasts were much more dangerous compared to the zombie dogs and zombie cats in the movie. Therefore, Faye had to delay his plan of conquering the Angie Empire. Since Faye watched a lot of doomsday movies on Earth, he knew how terrifying it would be if the zombie virus spread out of control. Perhaps in a little while, the entire Azeroth continent would become a paradise for zombies. Also, if these zombies could level up and evolve like the ones in the movies, then the humans' fate on the Azeroth continent would be coming to an end. Therefore, Faye decided to figure out the situation with that god, whom Emperor Karamov of Angie mentioned before his death. He would do it after temporarily controlling the zombie situation. Besides, Faye suspected that Angians were behind this zombie incident. While cleansing the evil creatures on the edge of the forest, the warriors of Chambord saved Leo coincidentally, and Faye got a vague plan in his mind. That was why he got off the Shenji with Leo and came here. Seeing the shocked expressions on Anna and others' faces, Faye was a little surprised. Then, he quickly realized what was happening, and his vanity was greatly satisfied. Elanians were far away from the Zenith Empire, yet they heard of Faye's name. Now, this can be counted as known around the world, right? Ha 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 ha! The king laughed hysterically in his mind. Elanians greet the majestic king of Chambord. Thank you, your majesty. Thank you for saving our lives. Your generosity and virtue will soon spread around the continent. Anna and her peers got up and bowed at Faye respectfully. Some of them couldn't hide their excitement on their faces. Since the king of Chambord is here, the rumors are true. The Zenith Empire that has a demigod is going to attack the violent and cruel Angians. From the strength that the king of Chambord showcased earlier, the masters of Zenith are as powerful as the rumors had said. If we Elanians can earn the friendship of Zenitians, there is a chance that we can re-establish our empire. Of course, these thoughts only flashed through their minds. After all, they weren't members of the royal family of Alania, and the vicious Angians already murdered those members. As ordinary citizens, they wanted to recreate the Alania Empire, but they weren't as passionate about this topic as the royals. The only thing that connected these poor survivors was their acceptance of the bloodline and the race of Alania. Sister Anna, thank you for taking care of Keely and Dilly. Other big brothers and big sisters, thank you a lot as well. I'm their big brother, Leo. After whispering with his two little sisters, Leo finally understood the situation. Since he was away for a long time, his two little sisters were too hungry inside the stone cave and cried. Then, they were discovered by Anna and her team that was passing by. They waited for him close to sunset, but he still didn't return. Therefore, they thought that he was dead already, so they left with his two little sisters. However, this team of survivors had terrible luck. Not long after leaving that stone cave, they encountered a big group of zombies and were pushed onto the stone hill. They were surrounded and weren't able to break through in time. If Faye didn't appear, these people would all have been killed in under 10 minutes. Even though this was the case, Leo still thanked Anna and her teammates a lot. They had good intentions and were willing to take care of two little girls who were burdens to them. Also, if the warriors of Chambord didn't appear at that location, Leo would have died under the claws of that mutated demon wolf, and he wouldn't be able to take care of his little sisters. No need to thank us, little brother. Anna smiled and patted Leo's head. No Alanian would ditch other Alanians and leave them to die. Right now, she didn't have that cold and murderous aura from when she battled the zombies. Instead, she looked like a big sister next door. Overall, Alanians were a conflicted race. A famous traveling poet had this comment. The fertile plain allowed Alanians not to worry about food most of the time, so these people appear to be gentle and kind. However, in the face of danger and disaster, the weak-looking Alanians can unleash craziness and persistence like an exploding volcano. Faye smiled and nodded. This team of Alanian survivors knew that these two little girls were burdens and would add danger to the team, but they still chose to protect them. These people were real warriors and deserved to be respected. "Where are you planning to go next?" Faye asked. Next? All Alanian survivors fell silent when talking about the future. Everything seemed uncertain, and they felt a little desperate. A team of survivors like them was too weak. A powerful mutated demon beast could easily tear them apart. They might not be able to live until tomorrow. How could they dream about the future? Anna frowned for a while and said with gritted teeth, "We are planning to head to the south. Perhaps that place isn't stained by the undead energy. Of course, we will look for other survivors, and I hope that more people will join us. Regardless, we Alanians will never stop resisting the Angians. Even if there is only one of us left, we will fight for the continuation and freedom of our race." This female warrior sounded a little unsure in the beginning, but she was firm and determinate when she got to the end. Good. Faye nodded. However, he thought to himself, this isn't undead energy but the dark and devilish energy which is many times scarier. The southern region of the former Empire of Alania is probably the same. However, the king wouldn't tell them this depressing information. After thinking back to his plan, the king smiled and said, "What a coincidence. I'm going to the south as well. We can go together." The survivors froze when they heard him. "What? Your Majesty is willing to go to the south with us?" Anna asked with a shaking voice. Anna expressed the question on everyone else's mind. At this moment, all the Alanian survivors held their breath, and their hearts were in their throats, afraid that they heard it wrong and wanted to confirm it by hearing Faye's words again. King Alexander of Chambord is an unparalleled master who might be able to kill gods. If he is willing to travel with us, he will protect us. They thought to themselves. Without a doubt, their safety would be guaranteed with Faye close by, and this dangerous trip would almost become a vacation. "Of course, if you guys welcome us." Faye's response made all the Alanian survivors feel elated. They cheered and thanked Faye for taking care of them, and a few young men ran to the top of the stone hill and roared. Now that they no longer had to worry about triggering the mutated demon beasts and zombies in the area, they wanted to vent their frustration and anxiety. In the last while, they had to hide and travel carefully, and they were all under enormous pressure. Now, all the negative emotions were vented after they roared. As if sunlight shined on the land after missing for an eternity, and the tragedy started to leave, smiles that hadn't appeared on their faces for a long time showed again, and they all felt like they had won the lottery. Now, the Alanian survivors all relaxed, and the fatigue that they accrued from the intense battle started to overload their nerves like waves of the ocean. Even that burly, middle-aged mercenary named Edward was so tired that he could barely move. After talking and carefully getting Faye's permission, this team of Alanian survivors camped on the stone hill and planned to pass this long but not so chilly night here. Since they didn't have to worry about being surrounded and sieged by zombies, the young people lit up campfires on the stone hill, lighting up the sky and the excited and joyous faces of these Alanians. This was the first night that they could relax and get a sound night's sleep ever since the undead creature catastrophe occurred. On the other hand, Faye quietly contacted the Xianxia. After a little over 10 minutes, Torres quickly came over with 10 elite soldiers of Chambord, bringing a lot of food and clean water onto the stone hill. The team of Alanian survivors wasn't that surprised about Torres and the soldiers' arrival. After all, the king of Chambord's strength was beyond their imaginations, and this man was a prestigious king. It was very reasonable to have mighty guards around him. These Alanian survivors were lucky that they ran into the king. They were able to enjoy their first delicious meal, since the beginning of their survival journey. Even Anna, who looked cold, ate a lot of food. She almost devoured her tongue. The two little girls, Keely and Dilly, didn't know much and chuckled after seeing that. Before noon of the next day, the number of people in the team of survivors increased. While Faye and the team of survivors traveled south, they ran into another group of Alanian survivors that was in a bad situation. It was a team comprised of 2 women and 4 children. This team was very lucky. The members were all extremely fragile, yet they didn't die in the dangerous environment. It was quite surprising. The sexy Anna looked cold on the outside but was very passionate and caring on the inside. After getting Faye's permission, she took these poor survivors into her team. One of the survivors was a 1-year-old baby. He was having a serious fever and on the verge of death. His mom was a young woman who was about 21 or 22 years old, and she couldn't stop crying for her child and looked lost. It was a tragic scene. If Faye didn't offer help, the mom and son might not be able to last another day. The harsh lives of Alanians were evident. Faye estimated that if this catastrophe continued, the Alanian population would at least decrease by over 90%. After some brief interactions, the Alanian survivors realized that the legendary king of Chambord, who was said to be the most powerful young master in the northern region of Azeroth, wasn't like they had expected. Instead of being majestic and hard to talk to, this young man was friendly, kind, and easy to talk to. Also, he always had a charming smile, and his charisma made others quickly treat him as a friend. On the way, Faye easily took care of the zombies and mutated demon beasts, so the survivors didn't need to battle until death. Also, when some of the survivors came to him carefully and wished to get his advice without offending him, the king didn't reject them and answered their questions regarding cultivation. Since this unparalleled master was willing to help, the young men in the team couldn't believe it at first, but then started to seek Faye's teaching repeatedly. In the past, even the members of the royal family of Alania couldn't get this treatment. Later on, Faye directly took out the beginner-level warrior energy training scrolls that he created when he was bored, and he taught them to all the survivors who were interested in learning from him. Although these techniques were only on the beginner level, they were from Faye, who was like a mobile martial library. Also, when Faye was teaching them, he gave them personalized advice based on their talents and body compositions. Sometimes, one of his tips saved them 1 to 2 months of training. The team of survivors snowballed as time passed on. More and more people joined the team. On the night of the second day, more than 40 people were in the team. There were 28 women, 7 kids, and 24 men. Out of the 24 men, 2 of them were seniors, and the rest were all strong young men who could perform laborious tasks. With Faye on the team, no one was going to die. Therefore, these Alanians, who were engulfed by fear and desperation, smiled from the bottom of their hearts, and they started to have hope about the future. After a full day, the team only moved forward for about 50 kilometers. It was a speed close to snail in Faye's eyes, but he wasn't anxious. Also, he discovered something interesting. He wasn't sure if it were a coincidence or there was a mysterious reason, but females were most likely to survive the corrosion of the dark power of hell. Then it was children, young men, and seniors in order. This point seemed to be proven in Diablo world. In Rogue Encampment, most of the survivors were female rogues. There were so few male rogues that it was pitiable. Faye wasn't sure if this were hinting at something. As the campfire burned and lit up the area, cheers and laughter, which were rare in the area, sounded in the campsite. The young men and the children stood in front of Faye in a formation and cultivated and trained diligently. In this chaotic world, people knew how hard this opportunity was to come by, so they didn't dare to slack off. They shouted and practiced, adding a sense of liveliness to the cold and lonely plain at night. Mercenary Edward, who used the double-handed sword, and warrior Anna, who was sexy, became the temporary leaders of this team of survivors. Under Faye's meticulous teaching, both of them obtained warrior energy and created a star swirl in each of their bodies, becoming 1-star warriors. The night got darker as time passed by. When it was midnight, the survivors who had been training diligently entered their simple and crude tents to rest. Since they still had to travel the next day, They had to replenish their stamina for tomorrow after a day of rigorous training. Team leader Anna and team leader Edward, who were patrolling the area, seemed to have encountered a difficulty. After chatting amongst themselves, Anna hesitated a little and walked over to Faye. She said respectfully, "Honorable and generous Majesty of Chambord." Faye waved his hand and said with a smile, "Just talk to me directly. You don't need to add so many praising words. I'm only the king to Chambordians, and we are friends. You don't need to speak like that with friends." "Yes, your Majesty. And no, I'm here to report to you. If we continue with this speed tomorrow, we will reach the territory of Martin City by the evening, and we might be attacked by the defense force of the Angie Empire. Should we change the path and avoid this city?" "Martin City?" Faye slightly squinted his eyes. Chambord already had all the information on the important towns in the former Alania Empire. Martin City was a city in the northern region of the former Alania Empire, and it was the closest to the border forest. It was a prosperous city for the trade on the border, and it had a population of about 100,000 people. After the Angians invaded, they occupied the city and stationed one full legion of soldiers here, and it was well guarded. However, no one knew what was happening now inside Martin City after the appearance of the evil energy of hell. Typically speaking, a catastrophe like the zombie apocalypse would be more severe in places with denser populations. Perhaps Martin City was now already a paradise for undead creatures. Black Pearl was now hovering about 10,000 meters above the campsite. Since it was high in the sky, and the semi-godly runes helped it achieve invisibility, ordinary people couldn't see it. In fact, Black Pearl had been following the team and Faye for the last while. On the other hand, Cyclops was ordered to move forward first to detect the situation. Faye was sure that in a little while, he would receive information about Martin City. Without hesitation, Faye made the decision and he said, "We don't need to bypass it. We can take this opportunity to go and check out the city. Perhaps the evil energy hasn't reached Martin City yet. The tall city walls might be able to help the residents of the city to block out the zombies and the mutated demon beasts." "Okay, we will go and prepare for it." Anna and Edward treated Faye's words as unquestionable commands, and they went to prepare without hesitation. In reality, Anna and Edward also wanted to go and check out Martin City. It was one of the big cities of the Alania Empire. Although Angians had occupied it, there were still a ton of Alanians in there. They hoped that their peers inside the city were protected by the city walls and survived until now. Nothing else happened that night. On the second day, many Alanian survivors woke up before sunrise, and they started to practice and train. When the sun rose above the horizon, the team packed up and slowly moved forward. They encountered more and more zombies and mutated demon beasts. It was fortunate for the Alanian survivors that Faye and the warriors of Chambord such as Torres were with them, and these people easily took care of these monsters. Otherwise, although people like Anna and Edward experienced increases in their strengths, they couldn't save everyone and might be killed by the monsters themselves. Until now, Faye hadn't seen any evolution or advancement in the zombies. Seeing these Chambordians killing zombies like cutting vegetables, the Alanian survivors all looked envious. If the Alania Empire had such mighty warriors, it wouldn't have been conquered by Angie in less than a month. Especially the king of Chambord. His power was on another level. No one saw him making any moves, but the zombies and powerful mutated demon beasts were all scorched and turned into coal when they got within 1,000 meters of him. While the team continued traveling south, they met many other survivors. By sunset, the team already had more than 100 people. Still, half of the team members were female, and there were more than 10 kids. Although the number of people in the team increased, the combat strength of the team decreased. Anna and Edward had to organize everyone and assign several young men with the duty of helping seniors and children. When the sky got dark, this team of survivors finally reached Martin City. Standing on a tall hill, they could see the giant city that was built beside a river. The dark red city walls made it look like a giant beast that was squatting on the green plain, and the flags of the Angie Empire fluttered in the wind. Many zombies had surrounded the city like the seawater around an island, and they screamed and slammed their hands on the city walls, trying to break through. However, the city walls that were more than 20 meters tall were something that the zombies couldn't overcome. This scene looks like one from Resident Evil. Faye felt like everything was becoming more and more similar to the movie Resident Evil. He wondered if there were also a mysterious umbrella corporation behind this catastrophe, controlling everything. Move forward and keep up the guard. Since the team was prepared to enter Martin City, they had to do it before the sky turned pitch black. Although there were many zombies, they were all at the lowest level, and they were nothing in Faye's eyes. Even though he had to protect more than 100 weak people, it wasn't challenging for the king. The group of people moved forward slowly. When they were about 2,000 meters away from Martin City, the zombies that had surrounded the city sensed something, and a fraction of them turned around and dashed toward the group while screaming viciously as if they were demons that saw the most delicious meat. "Guys, don't panic. Gather together but don't get too crowded," Anna shouted and tried to maintain order. Facing so many zombies, even she was a little anxious, let alone the ordinary survivors. Therefore, the team got a little messy. In a flash, the herds of zombies rushed over and engulfed this small team of survivors. Further away on the northern defense wall of Martin City. "Huh? There is more activity outside the city? Haha! Quick! Come over and have a look. The show is starting. Hee. How many Alanian pigs are going to feed themselves to the zombies this time?" A soldier of Angie who was napping while leaning against a battlement heard the noises outside the city, and he turned around and looked down while calling out to his peers. Excitement couldn't be hidden from his face, and it looked like he discovered something funny. "Tisk, TSK. There are quite a few of them. Now that I think about it, a little more than 1,000 Alanian pigs have tried to get into the city, but they were all eaten by the zombies outside the city, right?" Another soldier laughed with a gloating expression, and it looked like he was watching a show. "More. Including the Alanian pigs who were thrown out of the city, there are at least 3,000 to 4,000 people. Guarding this city is quite boring. Although we don't need to worry about these evil creatures rushing in, we can only get some entertainment through this every day. Ha. Old rules. Let's bet and see how long these Alanian pigs can last. I bet 1 gold coin. Less than 10 minutes. Ha. There seems to be more pigs this time. I bet 3 gold coins. More than 10 minutes. I bet 3 gold coins. Ha. Dirty pigs. Use your low lives and sweet blood to entertain your Anjin granddaddies. Ha. It seemed like the Anjin soldiers were already used to the scene outside the defense wall. Also, they weren't afraid of the undead creatures and monsters that terrified most of the humans on the continent. Instead, as if they were watching a show, they were excited and even started a bet. It seemed like everything was within their control. "You bunch of demons. None of you will end well." A series of choppy and stuttering curses weakly sounded by them. "Huh? You are still not dead yet." More than several figures were hung on the watchtower on the defense wall. Large iron hooks penetrated their shoulder blades, and they were hung in the air like fish that was being air-dried. It was a torturous experience, and the pain was unimaginable. Out of the 8 figures, 7 of them already turned into corpses due to the continuous bleeding and intense pain, and only one tall person still had one last breath in him. At this moment, he woke up from fainting, and he struggled and cussed when seeing the excited soldiers of Angie. These people were all the warriors in the Alanian rebellion force in Martin City. After Angians captured them, they were tortured and hung on the defense wall alive, used by Angians as deterrents to warn other Alanians. They had been hung here for 6 days, and this only survivor's name was Charles Adam. Charles Adam was a 2-star warrior and one of the leaders in the rebellion force. Although his warrior energy was destroyed, his body was tougher than others, and that was the only reason that he was still alive. In the last 6 days, Adam had witnessed 21 tragic incidents in his limited, waking hours after the intense pain knocked him out, leaving him unconscious. Those Alanian survivors from the region got to the outside of Martin City and begged Angians to let them in, but they were all shut out. In fact, some of the cruel Anjin soldiers treated them as live targets and practiced their archery skills on these people. Then, as more and more zombies gathered around the city, the Alanian survivors, who came here and tried to be protected in the city, had to fight with the zombies, becoming the new entertainment for Angians. These people were crueler and more devilish than zombies. They treated these inhumane things like entertainment and never got tired of it. You bastards! The gods will condemn you! Adam endured intense pain and cursed. Huh? It seems like you aren't feeling any pain. You still have the energy to curse. An Angian soldier rolled his eyes and walked to the watchtower. Then, he grabbed one of Adam's feet that was in midair and pulled on it forcefully. Ah! Even though Adam was a strong-willed, tough man, he screamed in pain uncontrollably. The iron hooks penetrated his shoulders and got locked inside his body. His flesh grew around the hooks, and his blood dried on them. Also, white worms were wriggling around his wounds right now. After being pulled, the wounds got torn open again. The injuries got worse and blood flowed down his body rapidly. Even his shoulder blades were showing, and he fainted again. Ha ha ha! The Angian soldiers around the watchtower laughed in excitement. At this moment, 5 minutes are about to pass. Guess who will win the bet? Huh? What is that? Oh God! What is happening? Just as an Angian soldier was about to say something, he suddenly pointed outside the defense wall and screamed on top of his lungs, sounding like a woman who successfully caught her man cheating. The other soldiers looked in the direction that he was pointing, and they gaped instantly. Their mouths were open so wide that a giant dragon egg could fit through. While they were distracted by Adam, they forgot to pay attention to the team of Alanian survivors outside the city. They weren't sure when, but the thousands of zombies outside the city were wiped out. Not a single zombie was spared. All the zombies were turned into charcoal, and they fell to the ground. The team of Alanian survivors already got to the city gate without any injuries. "Open the gate!" a sexy female warrior shouted. The Angian soldiers on the defense wall were stunned, and they looked at each other, not sure what to do. Until now, they still didn't know what they missed out on, and they had no idea how those zombies were taken out. After looking down, they saw a little over 100 people, and most of them in ragged clothes. Women and children made up more than half of the team, and even the young men looked terrible. It didn't seem like there were masters among them. "Shoot! Quick! Shoot arrows and kill them!" The team commander on the defense wall instinctively sensed threats from this team of Alanian survivors outside the city, and he instantly gave the same order when he sensed danger. He didn't even think it through twice before issuing the order of attack. There were many reasons for the rise of the Angie Empire. Except for some mysterious factors, the power of its military was vital. Therefore, although these soldiers looked orderless and lazy, they quickly reacted. As soon as the commander issued the order, arrows dashed down the defense wall like raindrops in a storm. Then, loud warning bells resonated on the defense wall. The sound waves expanded in all directions, and the people in the city heard them clearly. Suddenly, a golden screen appeared. With Faye being in the center, the golden screen protected everyone inside. Tink, tink, tink. The sharp, howling arrows were all blocked before falling to the ground powerlessly. This welcome isn't too friendly. It seems like Angians aren't interested in sitting down and talking. Faye lightly pushed his hand forward, and the iron gate that weighed more than several tons and could only be opened by the complex gear mechanisms moved. Creak, like a light wooden door that wasn't locked and was placed in the wind. The iron gate slowly opened on its own, revealing the Angian soldiers who were preparing their defense and were now stunned. Just as Faye was about to lead the team into the city, he suddenly sensed something, and he said to Torres behind him, "Take them into the city first." Then, he dashed upward and appeared on top of the defense wall that was more than 20 meters tall. Faye glanced through the 7 corpses that were hanging off the watchtower and finally looked at Charles Adam, who was on the verge of death. With Faye's experience and sight, he could tell that this muscular man was once a 2-star warrior, but his strength was destroyed. Although this man wasn't dead yet, he was one breath away. From his clothes and dressing style, Faye knew that he was an Alanian. What kind of power allowed him to last so long under such torture? Seeing the horrifying wounds and the white worms on them, Faye was a little stunned. If this man didn't have a strong will and tough mental power, he couldn't have survived until now. Faye was shocked. This man was a real man made of iron. The king raised his hand, and a soft energy gushed out and lifted Adam. Tink. At the same time, the iron hooks that were connected to his shoulders were chopped off, and they didn't even vibrate. Adam's injuries were too severe. Therefore, even a powerful master like Faye had to be careful, afraid that he might affect the wounds and intensify them. At this moment, this tough man who was unconscious seemed to have detected something, and his strong willpower allowed him to open his eyes and wake up by force. Don't move. Faye lightly pressed his hand down on Charles Adam, who struggled to stand up. Golden energy flames burned on the king's right hand, and the holy power of the paladin flowed into this tough man's body through the wounds, carefully healing his injuries. This man's body was in a devastating state. Even with Faye's strength, he had to do the healing slowly and cautiously. As time passed by, the two iron hooks that were in Adam's body and almost grew together with his muscles were slowly squeezed out. It was clear that a mysterious force was pulling on them. A small amount of blood flowed down from the injuries, and some flesh was dragged out along with wriggling white worms. Even though the smell of blood permeated the air, and this process looked shocking and painful, Adam was engulfed by Faye's immense holy power, and he didn't feel any pain. Soon, the Anjin soldiers around the watchtower woke up from the shock and figured out that this stranger was an enemy and not a friend. However, they were shocked by Faye's godlike power, and they didn't dare to attack. With their weapons drawn, they formed a big circle and surrounded Faye and Adam in the center. Reckless. Where did this pig come from? How dare you barge into Martin City, which is under our Anji Empire's control? Quickly, a roar sounded from afar, and a beam of red light dashed toward the city gate and resonated with heat energy, looking like a meteor. In the blink of an eye, this light got close and hovered above the watchtower. This man was a mighty fire elemental warrior, and he was very close to advancing into the Moonclass realm. He was engulfed in the red burning flames, and he understood what was happening in the air. After a roar, he struck down at Faye's back. Boom! A vicious and aggressive fire dragon dashed out of this Anjin master's palm, and it shot toward Faye's back with heat energy that was enough to melt iron and gold. It is Mr. Perth? Ha ha ha! Mr. Perth is here. These damn Alanian pigs. They are all dead. The Anjin soldiers on the defense wall all cheered. It was clear that they were confident in this master named Perth, and they relaxed while quickly backing off. These soldiers were experienced, and they knew the terrifying power of the fire dragon. They didn't want to stand close and be injured for no reason. However, what happened next shocked the Anjin soldiers, who had their confidence restored, and their bodies turned cold. With their eyes wide open, they observed the following scene. That white-robed young man who was focusing on healing Adam didn't even turn around. In fact, he didn't even try to dodge or pause healing for a second to counterattack. However, when that fire dragon was about to touch his back, this young man turned around and looked at it. No one could describe what that glance was like. However, that glance turned everything around in an unimaginable fashion. The fire dragon that could destroy half of the defense wall seemed like a little mouse that saw a giant dragon. It whined in fear and instantly disappeared. That wasn't the end of it. The master of Anji, Perth, was also severely injured. This general, who was invincible in the eyes of the ordinary soldiers, spat out a mouthful of blood when the fire dragon disappeared, and his face paled. He directly fell out of the sky and smashed onto the defense wall like a dead animal before fainting. Now, even an idiot would know how powerful this black-haired young man was. Invincible. This word appeared in the head of every Anjin soldier. For a moment, the Anjin soldiers, who were fearless in dangerous situations, felt a chill rushing down their spines, going from their skulls into their butt and freezing them on the spot. Their fear of an unrivaled master made them want to turn around and escape, but their training and soldier's instinct made them stay. However, there was no way that they could attack Faye. Suddenly, a series of shouts and roars sounded below the defense wall. It seemed like Torres and others were now battling the reinforcements of Anji. Faye wasn't worried at all. He had already scanned the entire Martin City with his spirit energy. Although there were many masters of Anji in the city, none of them were at the level capable of threatening Torres. Torres could protect those Alanian survivors on his own, and there were still 10 elite soldiers of Chambord around them. After about 10 minutes, 80% of the injuries on Adam's body were healed, and the 2 destroyed star swirls also came back. With some rest and natural recovery, this man would return to his prime. One key factor was that the luck of this leader of the Alanian resistance force was insane, and he was able to last until now and encounter Faye, who had the Hell Mode level 100 paladin. Otherwise, even if a peak burning sun lord who mastered wood elemental warrior energy came here, Adam couldn't be saved from the embrace of the Grim Reaper. You are... Adam slowly woke up and looked at the black-haired young man in front of him whose strength was beyond his imagination. He was baffled, and he thought to himself, "This young man doesn't look like an Alanian, and he is dressed differently. Why did he come here? And why is he willing to help me?" Faye smiled and thought of something. A double-handed sword on the ground jumped into Adam's hand on its own, and the king said, "It isn't the time to talk about this. How are you feeling, buddy? Can you still fight? You will know everything after the scums in Martin City are dead." Adam grasped the long sword and caressed it in intoxication, as if he were rubbing the soft skin of his lover. As he sensed the spinning star swirls in his body that had once disappeared, Adam was elated, and he looked at Faye in admiration. Then he glanced at the Anjian soldiers who were dashing toward the watchtower and gathering around them, and flames of anger shot out of his eyes. He roared, "Of course! I will never stop fighting until every last one of these Anjian bastards dies. Alanians won't bleed for nothing. Okay, warrior, you can take the Angians on the defense wall. Bastards! Wash away your crimes with your own blood." Charles Adam froze for a second, and then he charged toward the Anjian soldiers, who had all swarmed up like a ferocious tiger. The scenes of his friends and peers dying tragically flashed before his eyes, triggering this iron-like man repeatedly. Although he had just healed and was still a little weak, his blood was boiling, and he could take on these ordinary soldiers without an issue. After spending about 20 minutes, Faye set up some defensive magic arrays around Martin City. These magic arrays could help fend off the invasion of the dark and evil energy, and they could also block the charge of zombies and mutated demon beasts. Of course, when these magic arrays were activated, the people in the city also couldn't leave. Faye's instinct told him that there were some interesting things hidden in the city, and that they might inform him of something. When Faye got back to the defense wall, Martin City was in chaos. Torres and others defeated a battalion of more than 1,000 elite soldiers of Angie who were fully armored, and the Alanians who were being greatly suppressed took this opportunity wisely, starting their aggressive rebellion and fighting with their enemies. Faye sighed. He wasn't sure how many people were going to die in this chaos, but it was unavoidable. By now, Charles Adam had defeated the Anjian soldiers on the defense wall, and he was covered in blood as if he had just bathed in it. Even his face was covered, and his white teeth looked more wicked when he opened his mouth. When he saw Faye's return, he walked over respectfully and said, "Sir, what should we do next? Martin City is too chaotic. It is clear that some people are trying to rob from others and commit crimes while chaos is taking place. After all, chaos is the most fertile soil for crime. We must stop this. If this continues, this great city would be destroyed before the war is over. Is there a way that you can contact the Alanians inside the city?" Faye frowned and asked Adam while looking at the burning flames in the city that seemed like blooming poppy flowers. "Not a problem. I was one of the leaders of the resistance force." Adam revealed his identity and said confidently, "I think I can organize people and keep the Alanians inside the city in check, helping to relieve the chaotic situation." "Great. Then go ahead and do that. In terms of the Anjian soldiers, leave them to us Chambordians," Faye said and nodded. "Chambordian? Huh? You are King Alexander of Chambord." Since he became one of the leaders of the Alanian resistance force, Adam wasn't dumb, and he got more news compared to the ordinary people. Of course, he knew that the Zenit Empire had waged war against the Angie Empire, and the leader of the expedition troop was King Alexander of Chambord, one of the 2 unrivaled masters of the northern region. The other one was Emperor Yasin of Zenit. Since this black-haired, white-robed young man was insanely powerful, he addressed himself as a Chambordian, and he had a majestic aura that only belonged to top-level decision-maker. Adam felt like his intuition was correct, and this young man was the legendary king of Chambord. Ha ha ha! You were right. I'm King Alexander. While he laughed, the king turned into a dash of light and shot toward the most majestic building in the center of Martin City. This building was once the Castellan estate of Martin City. After Angian soldiers conquered this city, the Castellan of Martin and his large family of more than 300 people were slaughtered. This estate was also taken and used as the command center of the Bloodfang Legion, which was the battle legion of Angie that was stationed in the city. Right now, the building was well guarded, and no one knew what was happening in there. Although the dark power of hell didn't corrode this giant city, Fei sensed an immense amount of evil energy hidden in this building. Therefore, he rushed over and tried to see what was happening. Right now, standing on the defense wall, Charles Adam couldn't hide the excitement and thrill on his face. Seeing that dash of golden light, he knew that the Zenitian reinforcements that Alanians had been waiting for 3 months finally arrived. Although he wasn't sure of the attitude that Zenitians had toward Alanians, the war between Alania and Angie was the most important thing. The old saying, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend," still held up right now. If Alania could receive the help from Zenith, they might get a chance to reestablish their empire. With hot tears in his eyes, Adam turned around and took down the corpses of his other 7 peers before placing them on the defense wall in order. Then, he grabbed onto Perth, a master of Angie, unleashed his warrior energy, and dashed down the defense wall like a bouncing ball. Then, he charged toward the place in the city where the noises were the loudest. The king of Chambord was right. They had to control this chaotic situation quickly. Otherwise, if the chaos continued, it would become uncontainable, even more destructive compared to the undead creature catastrophe. Even if Alanians ended up defeating the Angian soldiers in the city and regaining control, the city itself would be destroyed by the hot-headed Alanians and criminals who were messing around. Adam didn't kill Perth to vent his anger. Although Adam looked reckless and rough, he was detail-oriented and thoughtful. He knew that the king of Chambord didn't kill this master of Angie for a reason. Perhaps this Angian could be useful later on. While Fei was dashing toward Castellan Estate, Torres and the soldiers of Chambord had brought the team of Alanian survivors of more than 100 people toward this place. They had destroyed many Angian soldiers along the way, and they were currently facing off the major group of Angian soldiers who looked like a black flood. The 2 giant Xianxia that were hiding in the sky, Black Pearl and Cyclops, stayed out of this, but those 10 elite soldiers of Chambord already constructed a simple teleportation array. After they matched up the magic frequencies and connected with the teleportation arrays on the Xianxia, more and more elite soldiers of Chambord walked out of the dreamy magic flames that were flashing on the arrays on the ground one after another. As soon as Fei appeared, the battle began. A total of 600 elite soldiers of Chambord in white armor came down, and they charged at tens of thousands of Angian soldiers. The scene looked tragic. Looking down from the sky, it seemed like a streak of white river water was trying to penetrate a black sea. It appeared to be a suicide attempt since it wasn't a battle of equal strength. Everything looked pitiful and sad. It was clear that the elite soldiers of Angie felt this way as well. Although they were stunned by the strength that Torres, a Moon-class elite, showcased, these soldiers had been through many battles and were mostly veterans. They didn't lack the courage, and they blew the bugles and charged forward. Dark clouds enveloped the sky, as lightning bolts flashed across the clouds, and a series of commands were issued. Tens of thousands of Angian soldiers created compact formations, and their black armor and shields connected, moving together like a mobile metal great wall. As they moved forward, they created a series of metal-grinding noises, sounding like mountains were collapsing. It was suffocating and made others feel desperate. Kill! 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 The tens of thousands of Angian soldiers shouted together, and it was terrifying. The vast sound waves rushed out like a flood. If Torres didn't release his aura and block the pressure, the Alanian survivors who were behind him would have fainted. After shouting kill, loud buzzing noises resonated in the sky. As if a lightning bolt dashed across the sky, a bright light flashed by in the low sky, and people suddenly realized that the Angian soldiers threw out more than 1,000 black spears. The pointy tips of the spears reflected chilly light, and they instantly shot above the heads of the 600 white-armored soldiers of Chambord like a big flock of birds. Then they dashed down toward the soldiers of Chambord, drawing a trajectory that looked like the wicked smile of the Grim Reaper. This type of spear throwing was lethal on the battleground. There were no accurate targets, and its goal was to cover a specific area. Even if soldiers with warrior energy encountered this situation, they might die. However, in the face of such danger, the group of people in white didn't make any noises even though it seemed like they were going to lose a lot of members. Like a group of white phantoms, they suddenly turned into beams of white light and dashed away when the spears were about 3 meters above the ground, dodging all attacks. Bam! 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 In the next second, the thousands of spears nailed onto the hard rocks where those soldiers in white were standing at, and a series of sparks appeared. In fact, some spears barely missed the Chambordians by their ears and backs. If these soldiers were 1 second slower, their bodies would have been penetrated. However, none of the Chambordians screamed or gasped. Their faces were calm, and their eyes were determined. Damn it! Star-level warriors! Someone gasped in the military campsite of Angie. The warrior energy that was burning on the soldiers of Chambord was so bright that it was eye-piercing. Crossbowmen. Ready? Front row, horizontal shoot. Back row, upward shoot. Ready, shoot! A military command sounded abruptly. Whoosh! 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 Arrows dashed out behind the tower shield formation of Angie, locking down all the possible escape paths on the ground and in the air. These arrows were all sharp, wolf-fang arrows, and they were shot from heavy crossbows. One arrow was enough to break a small tree, and even star-level warriors would be severely injured if they were hit. Shooting horizontally and upward from a close distance allowed the elite crossbowmen of Angie to control the area. It was impossible for the soldiers of Chambord to quickly dodge again. It seemed like a death trap. Seeing this dangerous scene, the 100 or so Alanian survivors who were watching from a distance almost gasped in fear. The Anjin soldiers conquered the Alania Empire in less than 2 months, so Alanians knew how terrifying the iron-armored Anjin soldiers were. Even right now, Alanians feared the mighty military power of Angians. At this moment, noises of blades being drawn sounded in unison. Tink! All 600 soldiers of Chambord pulled out their sabers, and the loud metal-grinding noises of the sabers sliding on their sheaths resonated in the area. It sounded like a giant tornado, shocking people to their souls. During this process, no one made a sound. At that moment, the 600 chilly and murderous sabers formed a metal forest that was moving rapidly, and even stronger warrior energy fluctuations appeared on the warriors of Chambord in white. The saber energies mixed with the warrior energies, and they shot up into the sky like beautiful fireworks. Tink, 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 tink. A series of metal colliding noises sounded, followed by explosions, and the locust-like wolf-fang arrows that were whistling in the air and flying toward them were turned into specks of dust by the shiny saber energies in a short time. It was a heroic and magnificent scene. The 600 people waved their sabers silently, and the 600 warrior energy flames that bloomed like flowers destroyed the arrow storm that was coming at them. The terrifying thing was that even when the arrows got turned into specks of dust, they couldn't get within 1 meter of the white-armored warriors of Chambord. The entire process was breathtaking, and it was so fast that ordinary people couldn't catch it and didn't know what was going on. After the warriors of Chambord quickly dashed by, the metal arrowheads, wooden arrow shafts, and feather fletching that got turned into dust finally settled on the ground after a long time, piling onto the ground like garbage and looking like the abandoned accessories after a grand outdoor party. Then, the white-armored warriors of Chambord didn't give Angians a second chance to shoot arrows with their crossbows. It only took the blink of an eye for the warriors of Chambord to draw their sabers. In the next second, the 20 white-armored soldiers in the front got within 10 meters of the tower shield dragon lance formation of the Anjin troop. Then, the soldiers struck out in unison. These 20 sabers were designed by Fei, the martial grandmaster who lived 2 lives, forged by blacksmith Charcy, who was from Diablo World, using precious materials, and had runes engraved on them by the mad scientist's laboratory. With mystical power engulfing them, They left energy arcs in the air. In the face of these brilliant saber energies, the tower shields that were made of iron and were forged hundreds of times seemed fragile like cheese. The tower shields were silently cut in half, and the strong Anjin soldiers who were hiding behind the shields with dragon lances in their hands and on their shoulders in anticipation of the collision were sent flying into the air. The people who also flew up were the 580 white armored warriors. These soldiers of Chambord flew above the heads of their 20 peers, and they dashed into the black flood-like Anjin troop as if they were phantoms at night and messengers of the Grim Reaper who were here to send the invitation of death. Finally, blood was spilled. An Anjin soldier was cut in half by a saber energy, and he screamed in pain, signifying the formal arrival of the battle and the killing. Before the first scream could disappear, hundreds of even more high-pitched shrill screams resonated in the area and overpowered the first scream. The cruel yet unavoidable close-range combat finally took place. The Alanian survivors who were watching from afar shivered while spectating. They were so excited that they couldn't control themselves. Like hot iron rod against fresh cheese, the white-armored warriors of Chambord destroyed the defense line that had been set up by Angians for a long time. The Alanians saw that every time a Chambordian waved their saber, more than 10 Anjin soldiers fell to the ground. Now, they got the first-hand experience about how powerful Chambordians were, and they got a better understanding of the legendary stories that traveling poets told about the Chambord kingdom. As time passed by, the chaos and riots that were happening in other parts of the city seemed to be quieting down, and the burning flames appeared to be controlled as well and began getting extinguished. Faye nodded and thought, "It seems like that Alanian warrior named Charles Adam has found the resistance force, and they are gradually taking control of the city without the trouble of facing the military of Angie." As Faye thought that, more and more Alanians rushed out to all streets and roads. There were males and females, and they ranged from blacksmiths to vendors to warriors to civilians. Although they all looked different, weak, and malnourished, they all had hatred in their eyes. Like wounded beasts, they couldn't wait to tear Angians apart. Alanians who had been trying to breathe and survive under the white terror and pressure of Anjin soldiers walked out under the lead of the resistance force. Like a volcano that had been accumulating heat for thousands of years, they rushed out and tried to charge at the Anjin soldiers who had committed all kinds of crimes. Their fury powered them, and they were prepared to die with the enemies. However, they were stunned and frozen. They discovered that Anjin soldiers who had committed evil deeds were receiving the cruelest punishment. Further away from them, people shrieked and fell on the battlefield, but none of them were white-armored warriors. The soldiers of Chambord who were wearing white armor and holding top-tier sabers looked like a group of white Grim Reapers that were harvesting life with sickles. Wherever they went, broken limbs flew into the air, and the blood dyed the white bones. Almost no Anjin soldiers could block these white Grim Reapers. Not even for a second. Son of Wind Torres stood at the edge of the battlefield with his bow in hand. Every time he shot out an arrow, a master of Angie was turned into a cloud of blood mist. To Angians, this handsome, elf-like, blonde young man was more terrifying than demons and ghosts. No masters of Angie could dodge his arrows even if they were 7-star or 8-star warriors or mages. From top to bottom, the arrogant, cruel, and blood-hungry soldiers of Angie were completely suppressed. This was technically the first time that the Chambord Legion battled foreign enemies on foreign land. Ever since the very beginning, Faye had been emphasizing the importance of getting the soldiers used to the atmosphere of large-scale battles and training the soldiers with practice fights. Now, Chambord finally reaped the fruit of its investment. This was also the first time that the Chambord Legion revealed its sharp fangs to the world. An invincible and terrifying iron troop was finally born on the Azeroth continent after experiencing the real test of blood and war. Then, after a little while, the outcome of the battle was determined. Although the ratio of the number of Anjin soldiers and Chambordian soldiers was 100 to 1, and the Anjin soldiers fought fiercely since they were pushed into a corner, they couldn't do much against the elite troop of Chambord that was comprised of only soldiers who were 3-star warriors and higher and perfectly coordinated with each other. In less than 30 minutes, the Anjin soldiers were completely crushed, and it was coming to an end. Rather than calling it a battle, it was more like a one-sided massacre. The combination of mighty star-level warriors and great weapons meant that the troop comprised of ordinary soldiers couldn't compete with them. Faye didn't participate in the battle at all since it was unnecessary. Instead of focusing on the battle, the king stared at the Castellan estate that was protected by the troop of Angie in the middle. Now Faye sensed it more. Inside the Castellan estate that looked like a small city within the large Martin city, there was a streak of dark power of hell that was hard to detect. It was far more evil than the zombies and mutated demon beasts outside the city, and it seemed like a cloud of invisible blood mist engulfed the entire estate, emitting the terrifying aura that only masters could sense. It seemed like something was brewing there. Boom! 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 Suddenly, explosions sounded inside the Castellan estate, and the ground started to shake.